I was the founder of a company called Virtual Operations, and we were UiPath and Blue Prism partner. And one of our early clients was Cognizant. And in fact, Cognizant eventually acquired Virtual Operations, and I ended up joining Cognizant to build their technology practice. But before all of that happened, I went to Phoenix to assess a program that they had that was a Medicare claims management program, and they had something like 15 people doing this claims management process. Now, the process involved SMEs who would sit in front of their computers, and they were processing a fax queue. So literally, they would get anything, and the people were faxing in receipts with claim numbers scrawled on them. Some of the faxes would be spam, like it would be a Chinese menu. Like literally, somebody got faxed a Chinese menu for lunch. And so they would have to process this queue, look at these images. They'd have to, oh, this is spam and this is a claim, and they would categorize them. And if it was, based on what it was, they would have to fill in, they would have to pull up this system and type in the information into the system. So like very, very typical kind of process. Because it was Medicare claims, it had to be done onshore. It was very expensive. And so I was assessing this particular process for automation opportunity. And as you can imagine, you guys know what you're doing with respect to automation. This could not be a worse automation opportunity. It dealt with unstructured images. It dealt with, and like now we have better tools of doing that sort of thing. This is 10 years ago. There was zero chance that there was an opportunity for automation in this. So I'm sitting with the SME and I'm trying to form a connection, and he shows me the process, and I don't know what I'm doing. This is not going to work. And I'm surrounded by a bunch of higher ups at Cognizant who are watching me do this thing, and I'm flopping, man. I'm going to have nothing here. I'm going to have a completely dry hole. And, with this little nascent services company that we're building, like this is our big client and our big opportunity to prove out the value of what we're doing. And I'm going to flop. And so I kind of finish writing out, maybe there's going to be another opportunity, to do some stuff, but man, this is just bad. And just as I'm kind of gathering up my papers, it occurs to me to ask a question. And the question that it occurs to me to ask is, what sucks about your job? And the guy kind of lights up. He goes, oh man, I didn't even show you that part. After I get done typing all this information into the system, I have to copy and paste all the information I just typed in and put it in an Excel spreadsheet for tracking. And I went, really? And he goes, yeah, it's terrible. I go, how much of your time do you spend doing that? He goes, well, I guess about half. Like half of your time is spent copying and pasting data from the application that you just typed it into Excel? And he says, yeah. And I go, well, I can automate that. And he goes, really? I said, yeah. So we do that. 2 days later, we had a proof of concept up and running, and we bring people in and we do a demo of this kind of little nascent process. It was very, very simple. We intercepted the click to the submit button to where you were going to submit the data. And then we just run the automation real fast that sucks all the data off and pastes it into Microsoft Excel. And then we resubmit that click. It was that simple. It worked perfectly. And so we brought the SME in to take a look and to do a demo. And he walks in and we show him, okay, here's us filling out the data, and here's us clicking the button. And then here, look, lo and behold, it appears in the Excel spreadsheet. And the guy walks out of the room, says nothing. And me and the developer were just kind of looking at ourselves. We're like, well, man, what's going on here? And he comes back in and he's got 10 people around him. And he goes, show these people what you just showed me. Show them. And so the developer like sets it up again, types all the information in there, clicks the button, and lo and behold, it appears in Excel again. And there's this one guy that's part of the group, and he was this rather flamboyant man, and he says, "Shut the front door!" and just screams like, "I can't believe this! Show us again! Show us again!" And they're just elated. It seemed like they were mad, but they were just absolutely elated because this was the central thing that was driving them absolutely up the wall. And part of the problem was they didn't have the data that they needed out of the systems to be able to properly instrument and orchestrate the process. And so, management just wanted better and better reports to figure out what they were doing. And in one fell swoop, not only did we take all of the human effort out of collecting that data, we were able to collect even more data than they could before, but then they would be willing to, because people didn't have to do it anymore. We could collect all sorts of things. And so not only did we make the lives of the subject matter experts better, we made the lives of management better and vastly improved the process. And we were able to do it in 2 days. So literally we went from I was screwed. I was sitting in the middle of this interview, and I thought like at one point in time, I thought the future of this little company that we were building was at stake. And because I asked that one simple question, because I asked, what sucks about your job? It completely turned it around. That one episode pretty much set up the stage for us to get acquired by Cognizant and go build what we built, which was one of the earliest, largest automation programs in the entire world. And it was all, maybe not all because of that one question, but it hinged on that one question. And so that's what I'm talking about here, about forming that connection with your subject matter expert. Like asking that question was about forming the connection. I wasn't even necessarily trying to elicit information, although I did, but forming that connection with him is what allowed us to have the trust, and allowed, instead of just showing me the standard run-of-the-mill process the way he'd done 1,000 times before, it got him into a different place, which is where we could actually create a lot of value. It's also about asking those relevant questions and collecting all of the data that you need to collect, and so that you're ready to capture the nuggets when they happen. The fact is that 99% of the data that you're collecting, the stuff that you're writing down, is completely useless, but every once in a while there'll be that one nugget. And then obviously probe all the peripheral aspects of the process. The fact is that everybody knows the workflow diagram. Everybody knows the piece that is on the diagram. The thing that's opaque to everybody, everything but the SMEs, is the stuff that's outside of it. And that's what ended up happening by happenstance when I asked this person, what sucks about your job? And so that actually became a standard question that I would ask at the end of all the interviews, because that's where all the gold was. So that's the way I would present that slide today. And I suspect it's a lot more compelling to you. In fact, I suspect you now have a much better sense of what the central theme of that slide was. And in fact, not only that, I suspect you would be able to tell me back. I think you'd be able to communicate that back to me. I think that you'd be able to communicate that to another stakeholder now, if you left this meeting and said, yeah, it's, here's some really, really important things about subject matter, SME interviews. And so I want to drill down a little bit about what happened, why the second way of presenting that information was so much more powerful than the first. And the first component is I captured your attention. So one of the things that happens is, when you're first starting to talk to somebody, you have something like 3 to 5 seconds to earn their attention. And then if you earn their attention within the first 3 to 5 seconds, you get another 15 seconds, right? And then if you earn it again within that, you get another 30 seconds, and then a minute, and then 5 minutes, and all that stuff. And so this is why one of the things that I've always that I've talked about, and especially, and Nanda, I believe when we did the podcast episode, I mentioned my Hulk in 10 principle, which is, get to the Hulk. within the first 10 minutes of your presentation. Otherwise, you're going to lose the people. Another thing that helped cement this stuff is that I transported you into a physical location. I put you in the room with me. I suspect that you like you could imagine what it would have been like to stare over the shoulder of that SME. And you know, you've all been there. You can connect with that. And because you're actually in a physical location in your mind, and because you can imagine what that's like, it's much easier to remember. Like our brains work that way, that we can lock things in if they're in specific locations. I captured a specific moment. There's a specific moment in that story that the entire story revolves around. And that specific moment for that particular story that communicates the theme is the question, what sucks about your job? And so I'll talk a little bit about the technique of kind of what you want to do to craft that story in a moment. But that moment really stands out in that story. And then the last thing is I had some central themes that I was trying to communicate, and it really drove them home. So let's drill down into each. There's one other thing that I'll mention on that, and it's almost so obvious that you kind of like, it's not even on it's part of all of these things, which is that I gave you stakes. What it mattered whether I was successful in this story or not. It was, and you know, it helps that it's true, but part of the reason that virtual operations became as successful as it was, and then part of the Cognizant group and that was as successful as it was, because this thing. And it could have not, had I failed to ask that question at that time, it wouldn't have, that probably wouldn't have happened, or it might not have happened. And those are the stakes here. Like the way that it turned out versus the way it could have turned out. Huge stakes. And all stories have stakes. So let's drill down into what makes an actual story. So again, the very first thing is those stakes. Establish the stakes, raise the stakes some more. You know, that's the very first thing in the story. The next thing is earn the attention of your listener. Again, you have something like 3 to 5 seconds to capture their attention, and then earn it again. And so one of the things I like to do is let's talk about how we did that I think you will notice at this point, I started this entire presentation with a story, right? And so I want to analyze the story that I used at the beginning of the presentation and the story that I used to illustrate that slide, to illustrate these themes. So the very first thing let's talk about is the stakes. What were the stakes in the shut the front door story, in the SME story? Well, the stakes are this company that I decided that I was working on, this nascent little company that I was trying to build, and we captured this whale in this huge Cognizant thing. I was about to be destroyed. Like, it was like I was coming up with a dry hole, and everything was hinging on that. And I don't know, maybe it would have worked. Maybe we would have found another opportunity. I don't know. But I mean, we were going to be screwed. And then, so the stakes are the success of the company. In the how to fail out of college story that I told at the beginning, the stakes in that story were whether or not I graduate. And from that, so okay, I mean, those are pretty big stakes, but again, why does that matter? Well, it matters because I'm supposed to move up to Dallas and live with my girlfriend and get on with my life. And I have job interviews. I mean, I've, jobs and stuff like that. If I don't graduate this spring, I can't graduate for a whole other year. And gosh, I was getting pretty long in the tooth by that time. I mean, like it's one thing to realize, oh, well, he might get a bad grade on this class. It's quite another to have your entire life uprooted. So those are the stakes there. Let's talk about the capturing the attention thing. In the Shut the Front Door story, I start the story with forward motion. And I'm sitting with an SME. You're physically in that location. It's interesting, huh? I wonder how this is going to play out. In the How to Fail Out of College story, it's the same thing. And this is an interesting audience specific thing, because in that story, I'll refresh your memory on how it starts. It starts with me saying, I'm sitting in the computer lab, hunched over a workstation at the University of Texas at Austin, working on my senior project. So to a lot of people, that wouldn't be forward motion. To my wife, sitting at a computer typing is not forward motion. But to you, it is, because we're technical people. Coding a project into a computer is forward motion for us. But to somebody who's not a technical person, it's not. And I would have to change that story, or maybe pick a different story, right? And that forward motion is one of the techniques you can use to capture their attention. There's some other techniques too. You can ask questions, open-ended questions. How would you feel if all of a sudden you had a bag of gold coins dropped at your feet? That, I want to know more about that, right? So there's a lot of ways. The thing that I would just mention is make sure you're doing it, and then make sure you're continuously earning their attention. The next thing is all stories have to happen somewhere, right? It's very, very easy, especially in our business presentations or our meetings or having discussions with people, to forget to cement the location of the story that you're telling and to paint the picture. Because at the end of the story, that's what you're doing. When you're watching a movie, you're imagining yourself next to James Bond running through the streets of Jakarta or whatever. When you're reading a book, you're picturing what's happening in your mind. And that the same thing has to happen if we're telling a story as part of a technical presentation or as part of a business presentation. You want the person there, because it cements the themes in their mind much better. The next thing I mentioned is capturing that moment. So there's a storyteller, he's a very successful storyteller in the Moth world. And the Moth is kind of a competitive storytelling thing. It's really, really cool, and you should check it out. And we'll talk more about that later. But he's one of their most prolific and successful storytellers. He's won their Grand Slam 7 times or something like that. And the guy's name is Matthew Dix. And he's read a book he's written a book that I'll point you at about this subject. And one of the things he talks about is the 5-second moment. What he says is that every story is 5 seconds long. And everything else is just setting the stage and winding it down. But the 5-second long bit of the story is the moment that illustrates the main theme. And so again, it goes back to, if I'm talking about the Shut the Front Door story, that 5-second moment is when I realized to ask the question, what sucks about your job? And it's impactful because that question is the deep connection. The theme of that is deeply connect. One of the themes, the most important theme of that slide, is deeply connect with your subject matter expert. And so that question illustrates that theme, or that moment in that story illustrates that theme. And so everything in that story is leading up to that moment or after that moment. And so when you sit down and you're thinking about how do I tell this story, think about that 5-second moment. Think about what is the 5-second moment. And then one of the things that you can do, one of the techniques that you can use is, okay, where do I start the story? Well, you start the story at whatever the opposite is of that 5-second moment. So in the Shut the Front Door story, the opposite, the moment is this realization that I have to have this deep connection and probe the periphery of the process. The opposite of that is sitting down with the SME and documenting what they're actually doing. I'm not connecting with them. I'm sitting back. I'm writing the stuff down. And so I start at the opposite of that, and then I work to that 5-second moment. Same thing happened with the How to Fail Out of College story. I'm starting very, very, very focused on my project. But the 5-second moment is the realization that I'm going to fail this class and ruin my life if I don't realize that the project is not about the code that I'm writing or the actual, in fact, the actual code doesn't actually have to work. Nobody is actually going to check that. What they're going to check is the papers that I write about it, how well I'm communicating about what this project is for and what it's doing. And so I need to reframe that. I need to realize that the work is actually about the communication, not about the work itself. So the opposite of that is being hunched over the computer, working on a specific module, and then till I get to the moment where I get the D and I realize, oh my gosh, I'm screwed unless I have this realization. And then the last thing about this stuff is identifying the themes. And I've already talked about this with these specific stories, but the theme of, like I said, the theme of the Shut the Front Door story is about connecting with the SME and probing the peripheries of the process. And the theme about the Fail Out of College story is the realization that communication is key. And there are other themes too. There are other things that I'm trying to communicate, and I'll document those as well. I do, as part of the Fail Out of College story. I want to communicate that I'm an overachiever. I want to communicate that I write good code. I want to communicate that that like I got good grades in college, and that this thing, in spite of the fact that I'm talking about how I might fail this class, I don't want you to walk away thinking that, I was lazy and any of that stuff. But that I was focusing on the wrong things. That's another one of the themes. Focus on the right things, right? The themes, well, yeah, we already talked about the Shut the Front Door thing. So that's how I break down those two stories. And in a moment, I want to kind of open it up to dialogue. But that's how I break down those two stories. So let's talk a little bit about some practical tips on how this stuff can be applied. And then I'll talk to you a little bit about what we can do next, or what you guys can do next. But I think that as I've been thinking about this myself, and as I've been trying to figure out where does this skill, that this unique white space that we have about being smart in technology, but also be able to communicate things, where does it apply? And the answer is it pretty much applies everywhere, down from like any presentation you give, every single, anytime you're at any event, a networking event, or, this thing that I was at in Las Vegas at UiPath, you're sitting down and you're talking about the story of you all the time. Oh, what do you do for a living? Oh, how big is your family? These sorts of things. You're telling a story of who you are and why you matter. That's the theme there. Why should I take my precious time and use it talking to you, right? That's the unspoken question behind the question. And so, it makes sense to sit down and think about it in these terms. All right, am I capturing the attention of the user? Do I have a theme that I'm trying to convey? Or am I just kind of saying, blah, 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 here's what happened, right? Anytime you're giving a proposal, one of my anti-heroes, the people that man, I just like it makes me mad that he exists, is the WeWork guy, Adam Newman, because he has but he's a master at this. He's managed to turn real estate essentially, oh, we're going to rent out offices, into a tech company and get tech valuations of billions and billions of dollars, and essentially, I don't know, screw people out of their money, screw investors out of their money, because like selling this thing. And basically all it is telling a story. He's telling this story about what it's like to walk into a WeWork and all of this stuff as if it's a technology company. One of the things that I am really bad at, and a lot of the people, especially the people who are really really good at creating things and doing things, are really really good at, or really really bad at, is noting and communicating accomplishments. It's one of the things that it just doesn't come naturally. It comes naturally to other types of people, but often those types of people don't really have accomplishments, and so it feels like dirty to me, right? Um, you have to do it. In this day and age, it's even more important, because the people who are able to claim accomplishments, even if they haven't had them, I find get farther than people who have accomplishments but don't claim them. And the people who get the farthest are the people who have accomplishments and who are able to communicate them. And so you want to be one of those people, right? Obviously, job interviews is another place. I'm coaching someone right now on finding a new position, and one of the things we're working on is being able to communicate like everything, every single question, every single point on his resume. I want him to be able to tell that as a story. Certainly any LinkedIn posts or social media or any of those things, oftentimes those are stories. And then of course in projects, post and pre-mortems, if you can capture the ideas using these techniques, that can be really really powerful as well. So what do we do now? Like, I've just thrown a bunch of stuff at you. I've given you some ideas. I've told you what a story is, and the fact that you need stakes and earn attention and transport into locations. Like, what can you do? So I have a couple of practical things that you can do right now that are, in the next hour, day, week, all of these things that can help you start thinking in this way and hone your craft. The first thing is start a list of your global themes. Keep maybe a note in your iPhone, or I have a OneNote document that I have for this sort of thing. And as I realized, man, that's a central thing that I want to remember. I really feel deeply about this. It resonates with me. I just put it there. And these are things like life is short, right? I did a competitive storytelling event this week, and my story was about my son, and the theme was first love, and it was about how some friends of mine lost their son, and that hearing about that story made me realize that you can lose them at any moment, and that every bedtime is is one that you're not going to get in the future, and every diaper you change is an opportunity to be of service to your kid before you're not together anymore. And the natural state of things is you're not together anymore because you're gone, which is way less bad than because they're gone. But but it can happen either way, and so you need to capture that. And so, be present. Life is short. You can lose them. The one of the things that happens in this story is, he throws up all over the place and it's just completely overwhelming. And I'm thinking, this too shall pass, right? But it works both ways. This too shall pass is how you get yourself through, man. I mean, this moment sucks, but I got to get through it. But it also helps you realize good things pass too, right? And so that's one of my global themes. I just have this list of global themes. And then as I'm crafting a story, I can look back at it and go, what can I work in here? What matters in this? The second thing I would recommend is, in a different document, maintain a story library. And I started doing this about 3 months ago. And I now have several hundred listings in that. And what I didn't realize is how many times I'll be sitting around with somebody and a story will occur to me. And I'll like, it'll come up organically, but then I want to secure that memory. And so I want to lock it down and add it to the story, the story library. And then the last thing I would mention there is start incorporating stories into what you're doing. And just, start thinking about those components of the story and then just work it in. And as you get more practice, it becomes easier. And as it becomes easier, you'll like it more. And as you like it more, you'll get more practice. And so that's the end of that. I want to start opening up the I want to open this up to questions and comments.